Hey, welcome to Bloom and Wilt Gardens. My name is Alexa, and today we're going to talk about the February home garden. It's February, Valentine's Day is right around the corner. I have my beautiful Valentine's inspired tree. I got this white Christmas tree for Christmas, of course, and I had this black and white theme. And then when it was time to put away, I'm like, I think I want to kind of keep it up and do like a holiday tree throughout the year. So I've done well to transition my tree out for February and Valentine's Day. I love it. I think it looks beautiful. Now I just have to get on the ball and start looking for St. Patrick's Day decor and some green and keep this going each month. Do any of you do any kind of like holiday decorations like that just throughout the year? I haven't really done much of it before, but I don't know. I think it's kind of fun. We're gonna get into the February home garden, and I'm growing in Northeast Ohio, Zone 6B. I had been 6A forever, and then with the recent change to the agricultural growing zones, I recently moved from 6A to 6B. However, my surrounding areas are still mostly 6A. The reason for me why it changed is because I live right near Lake Erie. I'm about 3 miles off of the shoreline, and so Lake Erie kind of acts like a big insulator for the immediate region, and it keeps us a little bit warmer than even just 5 miles south of where I live. So if this is the first time you're finding me, welcome to Bloom and Wilt Gardens. I share all kinds of information about home garden, backyard gardening, gardening on a small scale, and just learning how to grow a portion of your own food. We do not grow all of our own food where I live. That is definitely a big aspirational goal for the future, but right now I'm just focusing on what we can supplement to our grocery budget. So a lot of our produce we don't really need to buy for most of the year, and we're growing like things like a lot of lettuces and leafy greens, which are some of like the easiest things to grow, and they don't really take up a lot of space. I also grow a whole lot of tomatoes because we like to eat tomato sauce and pizza sauce, and so I cook those tomatoes down and can those, and then we have our own sugar-free tomato and pizza sauce that we use for all kinds of recipes throughout the year. So really, I'm not trying to grow everything that we eat, but I am trying to make the best options and choices to save money on our grocery bill month after month, and then also how I can just make our meals a little more healthy, because most of the things that we buy in the store are just full of sugar and added preservatives. So I'm trying to grow more of my own food so I can make a lot of things like the tomato sauce that doesn't need to have all this added sugar and extra stuff in it. My tomato sauce is very simple. It has tomatoes, garlic, seasonings like basil, salt, and like that's it. And it's delicious, and my family loves it, and the people who have tried it love it. So you know, it's just simple things like that, and that's what I try to make the most out of my home garden, is where are those ways that I can grow some of my own food that makes the most sense to support our family on our health and diet choices. And it's just fun and beautiful. I do a lot of stuff just because it's beautiful and fun to look at. So I like to do gardening as just kind of a hobby slash second job, which, you know, I love, and I love to share about it. And that's what I do here at Bloom and Wilt Gardens. So if you haven't watched the January home garden video, go ahead and watch that after this one. We're in February, so it's important to focus on February tasks. However, it is good to also go back and see what we should be doing in our northern gardens in January and now February. And so I'm going to be going off of my personal guide that I created for the Great Lakes Region Gardener. So this is my ebook. It's called the Great Lakes Veggie Gardener, and it is a 12-month step-by-step guide on your home vegetable garden. So if you live in any of the states surrounding the 5 Great Lakes, this guide is specifically made for you, since we all have very similar growing conditions, but really this is going to be very beneficial for most home gardeners in the upper hemisphere of the United States. So what we're going to be talking about for today in our February plan is what we are going to be planning for the month of February. What are the garden tasks that we're going to do in February? What we're going to be planting in February. So which seeds that we want to start indoors or outdoors in the month of February for the Northern Home Gardener. What can we be pruning in February? So there are berry bushes and fruiting trees that we can be pruning in the month of February, getting ahead of all those garden tasks that are to come, because April and May are going to get really busy really fast. So we're going to get ahead of some of these things. And what we should be picking in February. There isn't a ton of things that we could be picking outside, but there are some things that we can be foraging and looking for. And lastly, what are we going to be preserving in the month of February? Preservation is a huge part of the home garden. So if you want to grow any amount of your own food, big or small, now or in the future, learning how to preserve it is really important. And preservation isn't just all about canning food. You can preserve things by freezing it as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about the things that you can be preserving now to practice for later on. Okay, so getting into this month's planning, we're taking a lot of the tasks that we need to do throughout the entire gardening season, and we're breaking them up into small chunks each month of the year. So January was all about initial planning, like making your garden plan, figuring out which plants you actually want to grow. What do you like to eat? What flowers do you like to look at? Start ordering your seeds. If you're gonna grow anything from seed, January is a good time to get those orders put in. So that's what we're talking about in January. February, it's a lot of the same, but there are a couple things a little bit different that we want to focus on. So if you are going to be doing any kind of new garden, if you're going to be starting your very first garden, or if you're going to be expanding in your existing growing space, you want to use the month of February to start planning for those builds that you're going to be doing. So if you want to do any kind of raised bed, use the month of February to go out and buy the wood for your raised bed, any fasteners or screws that you are going to need to build your raised bed, or you can go online and look for metal raised bed kits that you can actually put together yourself. They come shipped to you in a box in pieces, but they're very easy to assemble. I actually did 2 raised bed builds last year that were the metal raised beds, and I do have a video on one of them putting it together. It was very easy. My children helped me put it together. It was not hard. So if you're not really handy with tools and cutting wood and all that kind of stuff, there are tons of really great raised metal bed options. If you're gonna do any kind of in-ground gardening, February is a good time to start getting your materials like cardboard or tarps to lay over any grassy areas where you want to grow directly in the ground. Okay, I'm gonna take my glasses off because there's some reflections going on that is a little distracting, so I'm sorry if that was distracting to you. But they're just cute, and they go with the February theme of pink. I love pink. Pink's on all my stuff. And rose-colored glasses. It makes everything just look a lot prettier on this otherwise pretty gray, gloomy day. But the glare is annoying. Okay, so back to in-ground gardening. You have the option to till your garden. There's a lot of people that say till or don't till. If you are starting a brand new garden, I suggest tilling it is fine if you have access to a rototiller. I wouldn't till your garden every single year because when you do that, you do start to kill the soil structure when you have continuous tilling. But for the very first year, I know that there's a lot of grass and weeds, and it is very beneficial to till up a new plot. So I have done that personally myself, and it's been fine. But if you don't want to do any kind of tilling or don't have access to a rototiller machine, you can lay down cardboard or tarps over your area that you want to plant in. And what this is going to do is going to kill the grass underneath, but that's going to take several months for the grass to be killed completely. It has to be devoid of any sunlight and water. You're going to kill the grass. So you're going to lay cardboard or tarp over the grass, and you're going to let that sit for the next 3 months and let the grass die back, so that way when it comes to planting time, ideally most of that grass will be dead. It might not all be dead, but at least it'll be easier initially to dig and turn that soil over, otherwise if you hadn't tried to kill it off. So getting that stuff down on the ground now is going to be really important. The longer you can have it covered, the better. I like using cardboard because cardboard will ultimately disintegrate and just become like mulch in the ground. You don't have to worry about it. With the tarps, you know, any kind of plastic, that's just plastic going onto your ground. It's up to you whether or not you want to use it. I have used plastic tarps to kill grass in areas, and you know, I think it's been fine. You want it to make sure it is a dark plastic, a dark tarp. Anything clear, again, the sunlight will get through. So you want it to be very dark, and put some heavy stuff on top, like some heavy bricks or some heavy stones, heavy pots, because otherwise all of that will blow away. Ask me how I know. So just want to make sure you getting your grass killed, so that way it'll help you come April, May, when it's time to start getting things in ground. You'll still need a shovel if you don't have a rototiller, you'll still need a shovel to turn over all of that soil, but it'll be easier if the grass has mostly died back before then. Next, we'll talk about our seed starting supplies. So February is a great time to start seeds indoors for certain plants. We're not doing all the plants, but there are some plants that we want to get started in February. And you might want to get some things like seed starting pots, trays, grow lights, and garden grow lights. They don't have to be the specific plant grow lights that are full spectrum if you're just going to be starting seedlings indoors. I have been using LED shop lights for the last 4 years, and they have been working just fine. I make sure that the bulb type is 5000 K lumens, and that is enough light to get your seedlings started. Now, if you are trying to grow a plant like to fruition where it's going to be fruiting and putting it out tomato fruit or whatever, then at that point, yes, you would need to have some sort of full spectrum bulb. But if you're just doing your basic seedlings indoors and you're going to move them outside within the next 8 weeks or so, then no, you don't need to have very fancy grow lights. If you're able to afford those and want to invest in them, then there's no harm in doing that. Those would probably be the premium way to go. But if you're on a budget and want something easy and simple, like I've done, the LED shop lights have been just fine. And then any kind of garden soil, so start getting those bags. Really, this time of year is when those garden centers are also going to be putting bags of soil on clearance from last year. Last year's soil is fine, you can use it, and it's usually a lot cheaper if you can find it on clearance before they get the new season stock coming in. So February, look out for those really good deals and all the clearance items on garden supplies from the previous year. So now let's start talking about what seeds we want to sow in February for the northern garden. First off, let's talk about winter sowing. January and February are a great time to get ahead on winter sowing. If you're not sure what winter sowing is, I'm going to link a video that explains all about winter sowing and how to do it, but essentially you're using some kind of like milk jug, water jug, plastic container. You're sowing your seeds inside of that, and then you're going to put it outside and you're going to forget about it until May. That's it. Your seeds aren't going to germinate any faster this time of year, but when the conditions are perfect for those types of plants, April, May, that's when they're going to start to germinate, and you don't have to worry about any kind of lights or system indoors. Winter sowing is a really great way to kind of get ahead on your seed starting journey. In February, we really want to make sure if we're going to be growing onions or celery from seed, that we're getting those seeds started as soon as possible. Ideally, you're starting those in January. I didn't get my onions and celery seeds sowed into my little seed starting pots until the very last week of January, which is still fine. Everything is germinating and, sprouting. That's really small right now, but they're coming up. And the reason we start those so early is because they take a very long time to grow. They have a very long growing season. Most of those varieties are 120 days, maybe even a little bit more. So getting those things started by seed, you start really early on in the season. If you haven't started those things yet, just go ahead and start them. They might come to maturity a little bit later. That's okay. And actually, onions and celery are more on the frost hardy side. So even if you weren't getting your harvest until like October or even early November, you're fine. Like, it's not a big deal. But if you want that earlier harvest, you want to get those seeds started now. And you're gonna start those seeds indoors. So if you're starting onion or celery seeds outdoors in some kind of winter sowing method, they're not gonna germinate. It's still too cold outside, even if we're having kind of these weird, really high temperature days. If you are in a northern state, northern climate, it's just too cold for those things to germinate outside at this specific time. So start those things indoors. Now, in the later part of the month, I'm going to be starting seeds for my very early spring garden, and these are plants that I'm going to transplant outside to my actual garden beds in early April. Early April, we can start planting frost-hardy plants like brassica plants, so that includes broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, kohlrabi. And anything that is in the greens, leafy greens family, lettuces, spinach, kale, Swiss chard, endive, arugula, all of those things, you can get those started and transplant very beginning of April. If you have some kind of winter protection, like a cold frame or a little hoop tunnel, you could get those stuff transplanted outside even probably mid to late March. It's just going to depend on your specific growing conditions, but in my experience in a Northeast Ohio garden, I'm typically planting all of my very early spring crops about the very first week of April, and I'm transplanting them outside. So at the end of February is when we're going to be starting those seeds indoors to give them the 6 weeks that they need to reach a certain, size to be ready to be transplanted outside. Any type of herbs you want to grow, February is a good time to start getting those started. Things like cilantro and chives, those are very early spring producers. Cilantro loves the cold, so if you ever try to grow cilantro in the summertime and it doesn't grow or it bolts and goes to seed right away, that's because cilantro loves cold weather. And chives blossom, they're beautiful purple blossoms towards the very end of May. So again, those are an early spring crop, and you want to make sure that you're starting seeds for those things right now. If you're gonna buy started plants later, that's fine, but if you're doing anything from seed, start getting those things done now. Herbs like sage, thyme, rosemary, lavender, those all can take a while to germinate and grow. So those are also really good items to start seeds for in February. If you're into growing flowers from seed, again, start those in February. Because I know that you want to have beautiful spring blossoms, and those things, again, they take time. Get your Mother's Day bouquets going right now. The things like tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, squash, beans, melons, anything that needs a warm growing season, do not start that yet. It's too early. I promise you, it's too early. Don't start that yet if you're a northern gardener. If you're in a southern state or a growing zone that's like 7B or higher, then maybe you can start those things in February. I'm not as familiar with southern growing seasons because I have never lived in the South, but if you are in the North, do not start those things yet. It's too early. The only exception I would say is for peppers. If you're gonna grow any type of really super hot pepper, like a ghost pepper, for example, then you may want to start thinking about sowing those seeds now, because in my experience, those do take a longer growing season to come to maturity. But otherwise, like banana peppers, jalapenos, kind of your basic everyday peppers, those will be fine if you just wait one more month. We'll do all those in March, but you're gonna wait one more month for all of those peppers, tomatoes, eggplants, that sort of thing. February, while the trees and all of the bushes are still dormant and still very cold, we wanna go ahead and start pruning any type of fruit trees or berry bushes. We do that while those are dormant before they start to set their spring buds, because it will lessen any chance of them getting sort of disease or insect pressure, things like that. If you're into foraging, that's really what we're going to be picking, is foraged native plants in February. So that would be things like burdock root, parsnip, or plantain. Those are things that you can usually find in your yard, or in a nice, forest wooded sort of area where there's lots of, vegetation around. And usually around February is when the maple trees start to release their sap towards the end of the month. So if you have maple trees and you've ever thought about wanting to make maple syrup, Start thinking about that now in February and getting your supplies ready for that. I personally have never done that, so I cannot give you any advice on how to do that, but this is the time of year when those things begin to happen. It's also a good time to buy fresh maple syrup from people who do collect sap and make their own syrup. There's a farm down the road from me that I try to get a bottle of their syrup every year, and it's delicious. There's nothing like fresh homemade maple syrup. It is not anything like you're gonna buy at the grocery store in the bottle, in the plastic bottle that's in the woman-shaped figure. That's not real syrup. Real syrup comes from the trees outside. Last thing I wanna talk about for February, what we can be doing in our February home garden and our planning and preparation mode to get us ready for this very busy garden season that's gonna come upon us is preservation. Knowing how you're going to be preserving all of that wonderful food that you're growing in your home gardens. If you're just growing enough to be eating seasonally and you're not trying to store anything, then you may not be as concerned with preservation, and that's fine. But if you are growing in any kind of scale where you're going to have excess or you just can't eat it all right away, then you want to learn a couple different methods for preserving your harvest. It's really good to practice preservation with using food that you just buy from the grocery store. You don't have to wait till you get your first 5-pound bucket of tomatoes to ever learn how to can tomato sauce. You should be learning how to do that much earlier before you ever have your own harvest. Learn how to make these things so that way when the time comes when you are in abundance of all these fruits and vegetables, you feel confident, know what to do with it. It's not the first time you've ever tried to do something. Use this slow time of year to get comfortable with preserving. So just do it by buying grocery store produce. If they have a sale on oranges, buy a bunch of oranges and learn how to make orange juice and how to can orange juice. You can your own orange juice, which is delicious. It's citrus season in the South, so usually that's something more prominent that we can get in our northern grocery stores right now as well. With citrus, you can make all kinds of marmalades, jams, candied citrus peels. You can practice dehydrating the different fruits and making like lemon and orange slices. You'll also be able to find a lot of squash still. Squash is something that stores really well, and I've seen a lot of grocery stores that still have just tons and tons of squash at really good prices. So get your squash and learn how you're going to be preserving your squash in the future. You by making different kinds of squash soups. I like to make a soup out of my tromboncino squash, which I'll link a video to some of those recipes that I've made with tromboncino. And I just make a ton of soup and then I'll freeze it in freezer bags. And it's really easy to do. And anytime I want soup later on in the year, I can just take one of those freezer bag out, thaw it, and I have soup ready to go. Making things like squash chips are interesting. If you cut your squash really thin, you can bake them in the oven until they make like a chip sort of thing, or like dehydrate them into squash chips. Very interesting stuff. I mean, a lot of versatility with all this kind of food. So use February while it's still cold and quiet and you're not going outside too much to learn how to preserve all those wonderful things that you're going to be growing and harvesting in April, September, and October. If you are utilizing the 2024 Veggie Gardener 12-month guide ebook and planner, make sure that you have filled out your January reflection. This is where you're going to be writing down all the things that you did in January, your top 3 accomplishments, what you did well, what you need to focus on next month. This is going to be very useful to help keep yourself on track and remembering what worked, what didn't work, what you need to do differently, not only for this year and each month of this year, but for all the years to come. Get in that good habit now of keeping notes for yourself for your home garden. If you haven't yet gotten the Veggie Gardener Guide, I will put a link below on where you can access that. It's a really useful tool and it will serve you not only for the 2024 season, but for future seasons as well. There are specific calendars for 2024 included. However, all of the material about when to plant and your garden tasks for the month, that can be used for multiple years. So you buy it one time and you have it for life. I will share some freebies though that I do have. So I have a plant and seed planning list. So these are pages that you can print out and then write all the different kinds of seeds or plants that you either want to buy or on a wish list item for this year. I was writing down all of the different kinds of seeds I wanted when I was looking through my catalogs on just like blank printer paper. It became a very messy list very quickly. So I went ahead and designed a more strategic list that is very organized and comprehensive. And I am offering these printouts for you for free on my website at bloomandwiltgardens.com. I will link the direct link to these free printouts below. Now, if you want to get more information on monthly garden planning tips, different free resources, make sure to subscribe to my newsletter. You can go to bloomandwiltgardens.com, enter your email, and sign up for my newsletter. That's free to you. I will soon also be offering online coaching calls. So if you are looking for a little bit more one-on-one support for help in your home garden, whether that be seed starting or initial planning, some consultation of where you should be laying out your garden beds or what you should be planting this year based on where you live, I will be offering online coaching call sessions that will be like over Zoom or Google Meets or one of those things. So I'm still figuring out some of the details around what those coaching calls will look like and everything that's going to be included, but they'll likely be 30-minute coaching calls. And if you are interested in being the first to hear about when those become available to schedule, make sure to leave a comment below letting me know that you're interested, and also signing up for my newsletter, because those are the folks that are going to be notified first once my schedule opens up for those coaching calls. I've been a home gardener now for 9 years. I can't believe that it's been that long already. It just seems like yesterday that I grew my first garden. My first garden was like in a tiny little, I would say like a 4x8 space. I didn't really know what I was doing. I grew a lot of kale that got eaten up and was full of worms. I had my first, real experience with picking cabbage worms off of my kale plants. Painstakingly, because I wanted to eat this thing that I grew. I'm like, why is there bugs all over it? To now, we have over 3,000 square foot of growing space, and every year I've just expanded a little bit. Nothing has happened overnight. My knowledge as a gardener did not happen overnight. It's happened over 9 years, but we all start somewhere, and I know what it's like to be a new gardener. I talk to a lot of new gardeners, so I am there with you, and I want to help you every step of the way. And so in those coaching calls, we're going to be able to dig in one-on-one on a lot of your issues and your questions very specifically. But hey, if the coaching calls aren't for you, I have tons of free resources here on YouTube. Just browse my channel, search for any of the topics that you're looking for. I have probably covered it sometime in the last 4 years since I've been doing YouTube. Connect with me on social media, Bloom and Wilt Gardens on Facebook and Instagram, and on TikTok, I am at Lex in the Garden. Again, tons of free resources, community, chats. It's a great place to connect with other northern gardeners and just learn from each other. So I hope today's video was very helpful to you. Please leave me a comment letting me know what was the most valuable piece of information that I shared with you today. And if there's anything that I have missed, maybe you're a northern gardener and there's something that you think is really important to be accomplished in the month of February, please make sure to leave that below so that way we can all benefit from your great knowledge as well. Okay, take care and stay warm, friends. Do something you love today, and happy Valentine's. Bye.